So my weekly retro, my black card is joy. So this week, last Friday, I went to my youngest son's assembly, and I don't get the opportunity to go to it very often, and it's just such a lovely experience. You go along and you sing songs and you see them get their certificates and they're so proud, and it was such a joyful place to be, so much joy in the room. So that was joy, that was my one. And then my white card is I'm getting my website redesigned at the moment, and after a lot of toing and froing, I met with the project manager this week and I saw the first copy and the first draft. It was nothing like I was hoping for. I couldn't find disappointed in the pack, so I put impatient because I know it will be okay, but it's a process, and so I had to really manage my impatience that was going on when I saw where it was at. I became an elephant rider in May 2019, and that came about because somebody had told me about the emotional culture deck, and I was really curious, and I connected with Jeremy via LinkedIn and we met for coffee, and he brought out the deck and we had a play, and I was just so inspired by it and could see the potential back then, which is what drove me to book on the masterclass. For me, staying focused is all about limiting distractions. So turning my phone to flight mode, being in a place that enables me to focus. I tend to do a lot of my creative focus work at home, so I can really knuckle down to what needs to be done. I'm most productive in the morning. My brain is just so much more creative then and focused. So I tend to do any gnarly tasks that require a lot of focus in the morning. Any operational kind of tasks like, I don't know, answering emails and invoices, I do in the afternoon. So I'm pretty strict about that rule, and try and limit distractions to enable me to do that. My favourite place to work is now actually at home, which is interesting because when I left the corporate world, I used to get really lonely working at home and like to be in an office environment, so I was in a shared workspace. But now I love working at home, which is also my place to relax, although I love going out in the forest. I live right next to the town belt, so every lunchtime, if opportunity arises, I go for a walk in the forest. I have to be really careful about how I separate my work focus and my relaxation focus, because I work where I live. And for me, the way to do that is I have places in the home that are like designated workspaces, and I also have places in the home that are more my relaxation places. And I'm pretty strict about that. So I don't take work to bed with me, I don't take work into the lounge with me, and my study is kind of like my haven for creativity and focus. My favourite technology, I don't know if you class this as technology, but maybe it's more media, but I love listening to podcasts as a way of getting information distilled into a short space of time, backed up by research. I also love apps that enable me to do things like might be a meditation app, or an app that enables me to link into somebody else like Slack. But like anything, it's about the context that I use them in that provides the gold for me. What I saw in the emotional culture deck that really attracted me to it, and I hadn't seen somewhere else. So I'm a mindfulness teacher, and as much as people think mindfulness is all about being calm, it's actually about experiencing the nature of reality, of which one of them is our emotional climate, our inner emotional climate. And so I saw this as a really great way to access what we're feeling and have a conversation about it, and just make it more accessible for us to delve into something that's quite often a vulnerable topic. The most powerful thing about the emotional culture deck, I believe, is its ability to generate really authentic, real conversations that could potentially be very vulnerable and are indeed very vulnerable, but it gets people to access them in a non-vulnerable way. And also getting people to start to really understand their emotions in a wider variety, because we tend to think in terms of happy, sad, angry, like a really short list of emotions. And what it does is it opens up the world of emotions to see that there is so much more there, and get us to really access and look like what's there. It really can create insight. What I find most rewarding about the emotional culture work I do is the aha moments that I see people get, whether I'm working with them individually or in a team. It creates such insight, and all of a sudden I see that almost that aha on their face when they get it, and they get how important these emotions are to drive their behaviour, to drive the outcomes. So I really love that, just seeing that it as a catalyst for personal insight. In terms of the type of cultures I've worked with, the emotional culture deck and the context, so quite a variety. I've worked in large organisations at team level, at leadership level, individual coaching sessions for leaders. I've also worked it with my children. That's a culture, the culture of the household. And I also use it on my retreats. I ask the question, how do you want to feel to flourish in your life? So yeah, very different angles that I've used it in, and all seem to work. The most powerful situation I've used the emotional culture deck in is possibly a bit different to what people might expect, is actually during lockdown with my own family. As we went into lockdown in New Zealand, I sat down with my family and we looked at how we wanted to feel and not feel during lockdown. And we all had kind of our own little sheet for that, so that we could then start to see how people didn't want to feel in the family, and how we could help support their desired feelings and help them cope with their undesired feelings. And so it was a really profound way for us to go into what could have been quite a hard time. I guess the biggest breakthrough I see in terms of using the emotional culture deck with people is them getting to understand that emotions aren't good or bad, that they're actually really useful insight into, one, our kind of inner world, and also that they're not necessarily something that is there permanently, that they come and go. So getting people to see how important those emotions are, the temporary nature of them, but that they're important to acknowledge in terms of creating the outcomes you want, and how you do want to feel and how you don't want to feel. The advice I'd give to potential elephant riders out there is to become your own project. So it's great to want to go and help others in their emotional culture journey, but the first step is actually self-awareness. So looking at how you want to feel and not feel in your life, how your emotions affect your outcomes, what triggers you, how you show up. So really start to understand your own emotional climate before you then go outwards and do your work, do your research. There's so much amazing research and literature out there at the moment. So starts with self-awareness, do your research, and then start bringing it out wider. So I tell leaders when I meet them, well, actually the first thing I do is I get the emotional culture deck out, and I get them to have a play, and get them to talk about how they want to feel. And from doing that, that gets engagement straight away, because everybody has emotions. We're not robots, we are human beings. And so by bringing the game out, by bringing the deck out, I carry a deck of cards with me everywhere. I just ask the question, like, how do you want to feel in your role? How do you not want to feel? How do you want your team to feel? And as soon as they answer that question, that starts to get buy-in. The way I measure success with the emotional culture deck, so there's a couple of ways I come at this. From a hard measures perspective, there are ways of introducing it into things like the engagement surveys, using the tracking, the emotional culture tracking exercise, looking at things like staff retention and absenteeism are another good way to see if there's any shifts in those kind of hard measures. But from a sort of a softer measure perspective, what I find is, are they still having the conversation? Are they still using the deck a few months later? Are they engaging me? Are they telling stories? Am I seeing things coming up on social media? And are are they still like bringing it into things like inductions and things like that? So there are some hard measures and there are some soft measures, but it's kind of the behaviour is more the soft measures, and the hard measures can be on how they tend to measure in their company. Curious is one of my favourite cards in the emotional culture deck, because I believe if we are curious, we have growth mindset, we are more open, we ask more questions, and we are continually evolving. A card that's not in the emotional culture deck that I write down quite often is, it's not even probably a proper word, but it's discomfortable. The ability to be more comfortable with discomfort is one. If I could add a card into the deck, I would add discomfortable, which would mean creating a word too.